Hello, I'm Alfredo Behrens. I lecture at the University of Salamanca and I'm Latin American. Yes, born in Uruguay, raised in Uruguay. And then I moved to Brazil. I became Brazilian. I've written about Latin America extensively, I would say. A couple of books published, more than a couple actually. Many articles, sort of peer review articles that made my name in several areas, but particularly in cross-cultural management, leadership, and communication. So I'm very glad that Dia asked me to talk to you about how to navigate in the Latin American culture. And this is the subject of our conversation today. To navigate in this culture and to communicate effectively, which is one way to do so, you have to figure out who speaks and who listens. And most of those that do the speaking are the ones that have the power, therefore the power to hire and fire. And most of them are in headquarters in advanced countries, North, Western Europe, and the USA. And those that do much of the listening are people like us in Latin America, where essentially we can speak out, yes, sometimes, but we mostly have to obey and sell and make sure that things work swiftly. So who are these people that have the power? Why is it that they do have it? Well, they own the companies. And why do they own them? Because they have researched extensively, they invented, they got themselves organized. And, this is why they own and run the companies that are most prominent in the areas of medical devices and pharma. Now, how do they manage these companies? That is the nice question. Management is mostly an American thing, and it fits the American mindset. And the American mindset is one of, being alone in the wilderness and therefore having to be self-reliant, having initiative, sorting problems out by yourself because, you were alone in the middle of nowhere. This is the idea that we have of the American Far West, for example. And all these stories that the Americans have told each other for a century and a half are stories that represent that mindset. They always have a goal, and there is usually only one path to follow. So you see, American management fits the American mentality, the mindset. There is a goal, and you have to get there, and there's usually a one best way to get there. This is true whether you consider Moby Dick or The Wizard of Oz, or films like Apocalypse Now, or The Little Engine That Could, which is read to children in just about every kindergarten, or even in cartoons like The Coyote and the Roadrunner. Essentially, there is a goal and a path to follow. Now, therefore, it means that Americans and American management particularly have turned focus into a virtue. On the other hand, Latin Americans come from a different womb, a different matrix, different mindset, from Iberia. And in Iberia, the real thing to do is to enjoy the journey. We don't cherish focus as much. Neither we did in Os Lusíadas from the Portuguese Camões, nor we did in Don Quixote of Cervantes. Essentially, what we do is we enjoy the journey in doing things, not really the goal. And looking after, seeking money is not really that cherished at all. This is why, most Catholics have all these cohorts of poor saints doing well and helping each other and helping their followers, but really not making much money at all. So it's two different matrices for mindsets. One is goal-oriented, self-sufficient, competitive, inventive, lots of initiative. And the other one is not really laid back because there is a lot of suffering there. But there is a joy of living, the joie de vivre, in the French saying. We enjoy the journey of being together. This is represented in the pilgrimage, for example. Right? The Catholics have it, the Protestants don't. because you see, there's not really much of a purpose in getting a destination, but enjoying the journey of going there. Hmm? So this, of course, from the northern perspective, makes Latin Americans look as collectivist, high context, untrusting. Now, what does collectivist mean? Well, yes, it's true. We like being together. We're very gregarious. We grow up in families, large families, extended families, and we remain attached to them for very long. And if it's not the family, it's the neighborhood. But we enjoy it. Yes, we are collectivists, but there's nothing wrong with being collectivist. Quite frankly, 4/5 of humanity is collectivist. It's only the Northwestern European and the Americans which are not. And regarding being high context, well, it comes from being collective. We spend so much time together that we know how the other thinks, so we don't really have to spell things that much. We allude to much of what we want to say because the other person would understand. And we're told that we are not trusting. No, we are trusting, yes, but not as trusting of people that we don't already know. This comes from, being gregarious and living in a family, an extended family, in a neighborhood. We don't really move as much. Therefore, we grow into trusting people that we know for a very long time. When an outsider comes, yes, well, to that outsider, we are not as trusting. But with the people that we know, we are very trusting and very loyal. Think, for example, of a samba school in Brazil. Well, these people work for a whole year, moonlighting because they're not paid, to deliver a very ephemeral carnival parade. But really, the level of collaboration and loyalty and trust and teamwork there is very high. And of course, yes, we are oriented towards a high power distance, meaning that we tolerate inequality. This is not a very nice trait of ours, but it comes with the uncertainty of living in our environments. We could be killed by landslides, disease, medical errors at the hospital. So we really trust on leaders, and they tend to be charismatic and somewhat autocratic. And it goes, yes, with exchanging loyalty for protection. We are not very questioning of our leaders as long as they protect us. You might say, well, that's not the right way to be. Well, it works for us. We're also told that we have a very circular perception of time, that we don't chase goals. But quite frankly, remember the idea that we enjoy life together and the journey. Goal is not as important. Opportunities come and go. So why should we run after them? You see? So all these things that are seen as negative amongst the Latin Americans actually fit our mindset. And if you learn to work with us in the way that we want to and like to, then we will get along much better. So what is this mindset of ours? Well, of course, there is a mythology. Like any society, we have our stories, right? And those stories lead to beliefs and morals, very much like the American stories do. And we have worldviews, like, for example, survival of the fittest. Well, that's not really what we like. We like people to help each other out. Now, whatever happens, this is what a foreigner cannot really see unless they look at our literature and watch our films and soap operas, which frequently foreigners do not have the time. You see, they're appointed to lead Latin Americans, and they arrive in a country and leave 2 or 3 years later without much contact. And unfortunately, by the time they're getting to understand how things work, they're shifted over to another assignment. So they miss the chance of understanding deeply who we are and why we are like we are. But the truth of the fact is, yes, that much of our literature helps to foster inequality. And there is a lot of power concentration, yes, and that's not good because it stems from excessive hierarchy, which means that, it dissuades people from inventing, to speaking out, to suggesting other ways of doing things. Not a very nice trait of ours, but that's how we are. If you remove the fear from the problem, we are quite likely to be far more effective at what we do. But fear is part of the equation. Mm. As I told you before, we led very uncomfortable lives. Not you and me, and not the people at this conference, but the vast majority of our population have trouble just staying alive. Mm. And of course, there's a lot of fear, and of course, there's a lot of distrust of people with power. Can we change that? Yes, perhaps, but it will take a different management, a management more attuned to our way of being. So, how is it that foreigners see us and see the way that we work together? Well, they see a lot of hierarchy, yes, they see the lack of trust that I mentioned, and they see a lot of personalization and much roguery and perhaps a modicum of adventure as well. Now, this is what the foreigners see in Latin America. But let me suggest that this is a way of being that is triggered by the excessive hierarchy of our societies, which is actually part of the way that we are managed in our corporations, even in multinational corporations. Yes, there is lack of trust. And how do people respond? By working by the book, because that is our first line of defense. If things go wrong, we just did what we were told to do by the Black Book of Procedures. Do we personalize things a lot? Yes, we do. But why? Because, we know that personal relationships work for us. So I might befriend your boss because if you tend to get nasty with me, I will speak with your boss. Not very nice, but that's how it works. And of course, yes, there is an element of roguery in our behavior. But why is it so? Because, we have all these pious lies, which actually are addressed to sustaining, breaking, putting a brake, stopping the excesses of punishment that are likely in a very hierarchical society. And of course, yes, do we daydream? Yes, of course, do we tend to adventure? Why? Because if we don't like where we work, we would rather be somewhere else. Perhaps if we win the lottery, we might be able to set ourselves free. So essentially, the aspects that most foreigners consider as negative in our organizations stem from excessive hierarchy. That excessive hierarchy leads to fear and fuels power concentration. And this is what we have to change. And perhaps that is where you may come in. Because if you managed us in the way that we like to be managed, we would feel more comfortable in working for you, and we would likely to do better. Now, how is it that you could change that managing? Well, I'll tell you, first of all, recruiting. Yes, most of these medical device companies and pharma companies are staffed by people who are eminently white and tend to speak English. Well, that detaches them from the majority of the population. So you can't expect really to be like the majority of the population if you staff your companies with people that are considerably different from them. Now, this thins the market. This makes it very difficult to sell. And of course, it instills distrust. And if on top of that, your corporation looks like it has a very high profit margin, which is evidenced in the buildings where you work and operate. Marble floor to ceiling frequently. Stainless steel, glass. It makes for a lot of comfort for the people that work there. But quite frankly, it's completely different from what people see in their daily lives, and particularly in our hospitals, where people are subjected to an abnormal rate of adverse medical events. So could we be doing better and more? Yes, of course. Just think, during this pandemic, most of the nurses and doctors working in hospitals were cherished as heroes. But not the people that work for medical device corporations or pharma companies. Now, why not? Well, I argue that if you are into the business of saving lives, then you should be part of the society you're trying to save. No, we in Latin America live in one of the most violent regions of the world. Well, people die early. Not from medical adverse events, but from violence. And partly it is because we tend to exclude the people that we should be hiring to make sure that they will become icons to be emulated by the people who they belong to in the poor areas, in the shanty towns. If we and you, with our help, do not give enough reason to study, to stay at school, to avoid the lure of the streets and trafficking and gangs, then we will just be reproducing the society, which is very violent and deadly. And you cannot really claim that you are in Latin America to improve the livelihood of the people. This is something that you have to think over at best. So, if you want to navigate in the Latin American culture effectively, make a handsome profit, and help while you're at it, then you better understand this culture. It has a mindset of its own, and it fits the people that live and work here. Try it. It's a challenge, but you might feel far more comfortable, and you will certainly be doing much better. I'm doing well while doing good.